Don't be mad, Mom, my son said softly, almost gently, as if the softness of his voice could cushion the cruelty of what he was about to do. For a moment, he seemed like the boy I used to know. The child who once held my hand tightly when crossing the street. The teenager who cried into my shoulder after his first heartbreak. But that illusion lasted only a heartbeat. He handed me a folded piece of paper. I thought it was a bill. Or maybe a letter from his office. But the moment I saw the bold black letters, eviction notice, my breath caught in my throat. The world didn't just tilt, it cracked. My hands trembled as I opened the paper. Words blurred before my eyes, as if even they refused to settle into meaning. My son shifted awkwardly, clearing his throat like he couldn't bear the silence he had created. This. I tried to speak, but my voice came out thin and broken. What is this, Amir? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Mom, it's complicated. Sarah and I discussed it. We need the house. Selling it will give us money to invest. You can stay with Aunt Layla for a few months until we get everything sorted. Aunt Layla. A woman I hadn't visited in years. Someone who barely tolerated me. I stared at my son, struggling to recognize him. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He kept glancing back toward the car where his wife, Sarah, sat waiting. She gave me a small smile, tight, polite, triumphant. Suddenly everything made sense. The subtle comments. The whispered discussions. The way they had started dropping by the house more often. Walking through rooms as though measuring spaces. They had been planning this. Amir, I whispered, this is my home. Your father and I built our whole life here. You grew up here. My voice cracked under the weight of memories pressing against it. Birthday balloons taped to these very walls. My husband's warm laughter echoing through the halls. The faint pencil marks on the doorway charting Amir's height year after year. He swallowed hard. But not hard enough to stop him. Mom, please don't make this harder. Sarah's been patient. We've already found a buyer who's interested. The market is good right now. It's a smart choice. A smart choice. Not a kind one. Not a loving one. Just smart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. But something inside me refused to break in front of him. Instead, I looked at him, really looked. He seemed smaller than I remembered. Or maybe the truth was simply larger. So you're evicting me? I asked quietly. He lifted a shoulder. It's temporary. Temporary. The word stabbed deep. When he left, the house felt colder, as though his betrayal had seeped into the walls. I sat on the couch, holding the eviction notice in one hand and his childhood photo in the other. One showed a son smiling with innocence. The other showed a man capable of cruelty. Only one of them felt real now. That night, I wept for hours, not for the house, and not even for the notice, but for the love I had given him so freely, only to learn he valued it less than a down payment. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. Something stronger. A quiet voice whispered in my heart. Don't fall. Rise. And I knew I would. The days after the eviction notice passed like fog, thick, heavy, and cold. I moved through the house quietly, touching the walls, straightening the curtains, folding clothes that held pieces of my memories. It felt like preparing for a funeral. Not for myself, but for the life I had spent decades building. Word travels fast in neighborhoods like mine. By the third day, almost everyone knew. That evening, as I was sweeping the porch, my neighbor Mrs. Karim walked over, clutching her shawl like she was holding on to a terrible secret. Can we talk? She asked softly. I nodded, though I already felt dread curling in my stomach. Inside, she sat at the edge of the sofa like she didn't belong there. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. I'm sorry, but I can't keep this to myself anymore, she began. I think you should know your son and his wife. They've already listed your house. My heart dropped. No, I said, shaking my head. They can't list it before I even move out. But her eyes told me everything. I rushed to the computer. My fingers trembled so violently I could barely type. And then with one click, the truth appeared. My home. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, excellent condition. Perfect investment property. Pictures of my living room, my curtains, my carpets, my framed photos, were online for strangers to see. They had staged the house behind my back. Moved my belongings. Cleaned it. photographed it, packaged my life like it was merchandise. A hot sting rose behind my eyes. Not just betrayal. Humiliation. "They've been sneaking in when you're out," Mrs. Kareem whispered. "I saw the agent yesterday." Of course they had. Of course they didn't tell me. I thanked her and she left quietly, her face full of pity. But I didn't want pity. I wanted answers. That night, I sat alone on my bed with the dim lamp casting shadows across the room. I reached into the drawer and pulled out my late husband's watch, the one he gave me on our 20th anniversary. The gold was scratched, worn by time, but it still glowed faintly in my hand. "Tell me what I'm supposed to do," I whispered into the darkness. Silence answered me, but in that silence something inside me shifted. Something old, something fierce, something I had forgotten existed. I stood up, wiped my cheeks, and went through the documents in my cupboard. Bank papers, medical records, old letters. And then at the bottom of the stack, I found it. The original house deed. I scanned it once, then twice, then a third time as the truth sank into me like a sunrise pushing through night. My son didn't know. Sarah didn't know. The real estate agent didn't know. The property was never in my son's name. Not even partially. It belonged to me and my husband. Joint ownership. And since my husband had passed, full ownership transferred directly to me. They didn't have the right to sell anything. Not a brick. Not a room. Not even the front door. The betrayal was deep. But the power in my hands was deeper. I closed the deed carefully and pressed it to my chest. "My house," I whispered. "My life. My decision." The fog inside me lifted. Not all at once, but enough to see clearly. They weren't just taking advantage of me. They were underestimating me. And that was their first mistake. People think age softens a woman. That we lose our sharpness as the years settle into our bones. They forget the truth. Every wrinkle is a story. Every scar is a lesson. And every betrayal is fuel. The morning after I discovered the truth about the deed, I woke with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. My grief hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed, hardened, sharpened, like a blade fired in the heat of heartbreak. I dressed carefully, wearing the navy blue shawl my husband used to say made me look too strong to argue with. That was exactly what I needed to be. I took a bus to the courthouse. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, listened patiently as I explained my situation. She reviewed the deed, tapped a few keys, then looked up at me with a mixture of confusion and pity. "Ma'am, your son has no legal standing to sell your home," she confirmed. "You are the sole owner. No one can evict you or list this property without your written permission." I nodded slowly, letting the words settle in my heart like stones forming a foundation. Sole owner. Everything they had done, the notice, the listing, the lies, was built on a fantasy they created, hoping I wouldn't question them. But they had forgotten one thing. I wasn't dead yet. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the cold breeze hit my face, but I felt warm inside. Warm with resolve, warm with truth, warm with the fire they accidentally woke. I didn't storm into my son's house. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. No. That was the old me. The mother who always forgave too quickly. The woman who bent until her spine cracked. Instead, I planned. For 2 weeks, I let them believe everything was progressing smoothly. They talked openly about moving furniture, about the money they'd make, about how they'd dispose of my old things. Dispose. Every word they spoke carved another layer of steel into me. One evening, they visited again with a real estate agent. They didn't even bother pretending this time. The agent walked through my house with a clipboard, complimenting the kitchen, pointing out great resale value, discussing buyer interest. Sarah was excited, too excited. Amir just followed quietly, probably comforting himself with the lie that he was doing what's best. I stayed silent and polite, offering tea I knew none of them deserved. I watched them admire spaces they had no right to touch. I watched them plan a future built on my displacement. And I smiled. A small, harmless smile. One that didn't reveal the truth I now held. When they left that night, thinking they had won, I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and pulled out a folder I had prepared. Inside were a legal notice preventing any sale, A new trust document transferring ownership solely to myself. And papers removing Amir's name from every emergency contact, beneficiary list, and financial tie. Not because I hated him, but because he needed to learn that betraying someone's heart comes with consequences. As I signed the final document, my hand didn't even shake. A mother's love is deep, but a woman's dignity is deeper. And I had finally found mine again. 2 weeks later, the day arrived. The day they thought would mark the sale of my home. I woke up early, not with fear, but with a quiet power humming beneath my skin. I brewed tea, opened the curtains, and let the morning sunlight fall across the living room one last time. Not because I was saying goodbye, but because I was finally reclaiming what was always mine. By 10 o'clock, I made my way to the real estate office where the final signing was supposed to take place. When I stepped inside, I saw them immediately. The buyers sitting stiffly, the agent smiling confidently, and my son and his wife standing together. Amir looked anxious, but Sarah? She looked triumphant. As though she had already pocketed the money. They didn't notice me at first. Or maybe they simply didn't expect me to show up at all. Mom! Amir's voice cracked when he finally saw me. What are you doing here? The agent stepped forward. Mrs. Rahman? Great timing. We just need your signature to finalize the transfer. I set my purse down slowly, deliberately. I won't be signing anything. Silence fell like a stone. Sarah blinked rapidly. What do you mean? We already negotiated the price. I know, I said calmly. Unfortunately, none of that matters. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder containing the deed, the trust documents, and the legal notice. I placed them neatly on the table. This, I said, tapping the deed, is the original ownership document. The house belonged to my husband and me, and since he passed, full ownership belongs to me. The agent frowned, flipping through the pages. The buyers exchanged uneasy glances. Amir stepped closer, his voice panicked. Mom, you don't understand. No, I interrupted gently. You didn't understand. I pointed to the trust document. I've transferred the house into a private trust under my name. You have no claim. Not now, not ever. Sarah's face drained of color. You can't do that. This was supposed to. It was supposed to what? I asked softly. Save you? Pay your debts? Fund your investments? Replace the hard work you refused to do? Her lips quivered but no sound came. Amir's shoulders sagged. Mom, please. We need this. For a moment, just a moment, the mother in me cracked. I saw not the man who betrayed me, but the little boy who once cried when he scraped his knee. The boy who missed his father. The boy who once loved me without greed in his heart. But that boy was gone. And the man in front of me had made his choices. I'm leaving the house, I said softly. Because I want to. Not because you force me. But you will not profit from my life's work. Tears filled Amir's eyes. So you're letting us lose everything? I touched his hand. I'm letting you learn. His breath hitched, and he looked away. I gathered my papers, gave a polite nod to the stunned buyers, and walked out of the office with my spine straight and my heart steady. In the following weeks, I moved into a small cottage by the sea. The air was fresh, the nights quiet, the mornings peaceful. I planted flowers in the yard, cooked dinner while watching the sunset, and finally, slept without fear. One evening, Amir appeared at my doorstep. Tired, defeated, broken by the consequences of his own decisions. Mom, I'm sorry, he whispered. I believed him. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I hope you grow, I told him. That's all a mother can wish for. And as he walked away, I felt no anger, only peace. Some revenge is loud and cruel. Mine was silent, simple, undeniable. I didn't destroy them. I simply chose myself. And that, after a lifetime of giving, was the sweetest revenge of all.